Hello everyone, and welcome to this next video in this real-world tutorial series in the Airbus A320 in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. So the final video here looks at our ILS capture and arrival into Faro, and of course featuring hopefully a nice safe landing. If you haven't checked out the previous videos in this tutorial series up to this point, please do go ahead and check those out so you know how we've set everything up ready for our approach. You can see now we are coming in direct to Uppsala, as you'll remember from the previous video, and we want to be at flight level 50 by the time we get there. After that, we're then going to track to Vernal, at which point we will capture the ILS, as Vernal is our initial approach fix, to turn onto the ILS capture for runway 10 at Faro. So we're now just going to set our descent to start continuing down to Uppsala. We're 14 miles away, so we're just going to roll that back down now to 5,000 feet. We can either go into open descent and thrust idle, or we can control that descent rate ourselves by selecting a vertical speed descent and then pulling that, and we now confirm that we've got a vertical speed of 1,000 feet per minute set, and flight level 050 is set here in the PFD. Our aircraft is now about to pass the decel point. The decel point is the stage where the aircraft starts decelerating and targeting green dot speed. If your aircraft passes over this on its flight plan, the aircraft will automatically enter what's called the approach phase of the flight, which we can then go to our performance page down here, and we'll see that the aircraft is now in the approach phase. If your aircraft doesn't pass over the purple or magenta D to enable the decel point automatically, you will have to arm and activate the approach phase yourself, and it's normally an option after pressing the performance page that you will see down here. And you have to select that twice, one to turn it amber, one to confirm, press it again. So now we're in the approach phase. You can see the aircraft is slowing down and it starts to target this green dot speed, which is the best lift to drag ratio for the aircraft. Once you are in the approach phase, unless you've got any other speed restrictions given to you by air traffic control, always ensure that your speed is in managed mode for that to happen. So we're now about 6.5 miles away from well, actually we're now 7.5 miles away from Vernal. It's now targeting Vernal for some reason up here. Again, this is a sim bug just because it wouldn't go on to the next waypoint until passing the previous waypoint. As you can see, we've still got about 5 miles to go until passing Uppsala. So we're now Alt Star, which means it's capturing our selected flight level 050. Once we do pass Uppsala, we want to then descend down to a flight level of 3,000 feet, which is our platform. Well, actually our platform altitude is 2,000 feet, but if we just come here, the lowest we want to go down to is 3,000 feet. After passing Vernal, then we're going to descend down to 2,000 feet, our platform altitude. However, by the time we get here, we may be on track to capture the glide slope anyway, so we can play that by ear as things progress. By the time we had passed 10,000 feet, however, our seatbelt sign should have been on. Just for the way I set up this video, it wasn't, but the seatbelt sign should have been on. Once we turn on the seatbelt sign, we run the approach checklist, make sure that our minimums are set as shown in the previous video. Our engine mode selector is normal, the weather is good today, and the electronic flight bag is all stowed. So we're now at green dot speed, and we're all ready to make our arrival into Faro, which is over here somewhere. We would also want to make sure as well that our local pressure is set in the standby before passing 10,000 feet, which for the sake of this video, our local pressure and the standard pressure is actually the same, just of the weather that I've set for this tutorial, so it's 1013. The transition altitude here is 4,000 feet, so we're now turning direct to Vernal. I'm now going to tell the aircraft to descend to 3,000 feet, so I'm going to set now local pressure 1013, the QNH, and down we go. Once again, I'm going to use a selected VS speed, so confirm speed, vertical speed minus 1200 feet per minute, and 3,000 feet blue is confirmed. I'm now going to turn on the landing system, and we can see the landing system now identifies 90 miles away. And all that's left to do is make sure we get a nice smooth ILS capture. Now, two ways to do this. If we want to capture just the localizer, which is the left and right of the ILS beam, then we just turn on the lock mode. If we want to capture both the localizer and the glide slope at the same time, you can turn on the approach mode. This aircraft that I'm using today is the new experimental version of the Airbus 320nx from fly-by-wire. Since making the previous video and this one, the new custom autopilot feature has now been released, which features the auto land system, so that would be an option if you wish to use it. But of course, on a nice clear day like today, we wouldn't be doing an auto land, so we're going to fly this approach in manually. So our flight plan sequencing looks really nice. We're in the approach phase. We've got managed speed selected. Flight path, we're just monitoring that and make sure everything is going as it should be. Don't need any speed brakes. We're nicely slowed down. We're at Alt Star now as we look to capture 3,000 feet. Our landing lights are on. So the next thing we're going to do, we're now below that glide slope anyway, so that looks really nice and happy. I'm not going to descend to 2,000 feet, the platform altitude, as we're already below that, but what it does tell us is that we would look to capture the glide slope. If we were at 2,000 feet, we would capture that at about 6 miles away. So what we're going to do now is we're going to turn on the localizer, and now we've got lock blue, which means the aircraft is now going to capture the ILS, and we'll start to see that localizer moving across here as it intercepts it. As we do that, we can now look to go flaps 1. What you will notice as well, when we go flaps 1 in the air, only the slats are deployed. You only get slats being deployed at this stage and not the flaps. Flaps will come out when we select flaps 2 config. So the aircraft is now looking to target the next waypoint, which is Vero 455, and you can see that that is absolutely fine. So from Vero we then intercept 455, and it's actually at 455 that we will intercept that localizer, but we can see the localizer is blue and armed, so we're looking forward to capturing that any moment now. You can see the aircraft just banking right a little bit there, and that's a little bit of a sim bug. It just wants to sort of pull over towards that localizer. We can actually see now that the glide slope has become active. Now this is a little bit of a cause for concern, just because the aircraft needs to capture the localizer prior to capturing the glide slope. We can see now it actually is doing. We've gone lock star, so you can see the localizer coming across there. As the glide slope is now also starting to be captured as well, we need to ensure that the approach mode is turned on, because if we left it just in localizer mode, we would only capture the localizer and not the glide slope. So now we can go ahead, turn that on, and we can see glide slope blue is armed and Cat 3 single is shown. So just to reiterate that again, you must capture the localizer, first before capturing the glide slope. You could not turn on the approach mode and capture the glide slope prior to capturing the localizer. Glide slope star, so that's glide slope capture is about to take place, and you'll see that's just lined up nicely. We're 9.2 miles away, and the aircraft is now starting to descend down the glide slope. There we go, glide slope captured. So around 2,500 feet, I expect to see the radio altimeter come alive. And there we can obviously see the runway nicely lined up in front of us. There we go, 2,500, radio altimeter is alive. 2,000 feet, we're going to go flaps 2. And what we're listening to, just as we touch down on the runway, because this all happens very quick, is by the 30 feet radio altimeter call out, we want to make sure that our thrust levers are at idle by that point. So usually, just as we hear the 30 feet call out, go to thrust idle and reduce those. So 2,000 feet, let's go flaps 2. And the aircraft will now start targeting F speed, as long, of course, that you're in manage mode. 5.5 miles out, we look to pop the landing gear down at around 5 miles. Auto brake is not required for this this landing because we've got a nice long runway, so don't worry too much about that. So 5 miles out, we're going to go landing gear down, ground spoilers, we shall arm those as well. We're then going to come up here, we're going to ding the cabin, turn on the nose wheel lights and runway turn off lights. We can now do a speed check, make sure we can go to flaps 3, which we can, so flaps 3. And then very shortly after now, we can go flaps full. And we're now fully configured for our landing. So now, once we've gone flaps full, we run the landing checklist. So check the cabin is secured for landing, which it is. Auto thrust shows speed. Our go around altitude of 3,000 feet is set, and ECAM memo landing no blue. So now 1,000 feet. This is the stage where I would look to take off the autopilot, and we're going to bring that in. So we're at 1,000 feet. Let's turn the autopilot off, and I have control. Just before I do, we'll flick that over to the ILS rose mode, so we can monitor that as we come into land. One of the hardest things I find about doing this in a simulator is that you don't have any peripheral vision. So trying to get that perfect alignment of where you want to be looking is actually quite difficult. It's arguably easier to land the real aircraft than it is the 2D screen of a simulator. But we're obviously checking between these instruments down here, but don't ever stop looking out the window. At the end of the day, the window is the perfect tool. And we can see there's a little bit of gusting just coming through there. As I don't know if you saw that, but we did. We're getting the call out of 100 above. That's 100 above our minimums. Try and keep the centre line lined up. There's the minimums. Continue. Thrust to idle. And we're down. So, reverse is on. Check we're decelerating. And the aircraft is now free to roll out. By 70 knots we can take the reversers off. And we're now good to vacate the runway. A little bit of brake pressure as well, just to help slow us down. And we can now look to vacate left, following the taxi lines. We then, of course, need to make sure that before we stop, we are past the stop bars, as you can see here. And that's not just yourself. You need to make sure you're fully past the stop bars, remembering you've got quite a bit of aircraft behind you. So if we have a quick look outside, you can see now we're past those stop bars. We can hold here. We're now going to bring the spoilers back in and turn off those landing lights. We can also turn off the strobe lights. Once they're all done, we want to come down and turn our radar off, so the weather radar, predictive wind shear can come off, transponder goes to auto. We can bring the flaps back in. Any anti-ice, if that was on, can come off, and we can turn off all the green push buttons on the FCU. Check the temperatures of the brakes. Make sure we don't need brake fans. If they're below 150, then we can leave those brake fans off. 300 degrees is a important point. So if they're getting really high, we can now turn on the fan switch, which is located just there, the brake fans. But as the temperatures are only 135, 130, that's fine. So we don't need that. We can turn that off. All that's left to do now is taxi to our stand of choice. So let's just go ahead and start a taxi roll. If we wished, and it was a long taxi to the apron, to the terminal, we could do a single engine taxi. If we wanted to do a single engine taxi, I shall show you how to do that now. So what we would do is we would turn on the yellow hydraulic pump. We could then shut down engine number 2, and the aircraft can now taxi on a single engine. This is quite useful, of course, if you have got a long taxi, because as you know, the Airbus A320 will taxi under idle thrust quite comfortably, which means there's a lot of tapping on the brakes required. If you're taxiing with just one engine, then it becomes a little bit more manageable. So let's just pick a parking stand, first one we come to. And we'll go over there. Before we do, of course, let's turn the taxi light off. In fact, that taxi light should still have been on at this point. We can turn it off just before we turn onto the parking stands. That just makes sure we don't blind any of the ground crew that happen to be waiting to greet us. And then we're going to shut down our aircraft. So once we've stopped, we're going to apply the parking brake. Parking brake is now on. Make sure any anti-ice, if you had it on, that can come off. The yellow yellow hydraulic pump can come off. Engines 1 and 2, if you haven't already shut off engine 2, so engine 1 can come off. As soon as they're off, the seatbelt signs can also come off. The rotating beacon light can also come off as well. And of course, the one thing that we didn't do was start the APU. Once landing, you would normally start the APU, or at least wait until external power is connected before turning off both engines 1 and 2. Otherwise, you get a nice silent flight deck. Rotating beacon light can come off as well once the engines are below 10% N1, which after turning them off from the masters really doesn't take too much time at all. If we want to go a little bit further, we can then put the transponder back into standby and we squawk code 2000. There it is. So there we are. We're now safely at the terminal. We could then use our flypad to call the jetway, and that should start to bring that over. If we want some baggage as well, just to make the thing look a little bit more realistic, we can press the baggage button, and the baggage should then come. Press the catering should come as well, and hopefully if I have a quick look outside, we should get some baggage handlers arriving at some point soon. I think it's not always going to work. It depends. Oh, there we go. They've now realised that we've been calling them. So there we are. We're down on the ground at Faro. So this tutorial right from the start has taken us from London Gatwick to Faro in the full flight phase, showing you all the critical stages and everything that we need to do in order to make a successful flight. This series now is at an end, but it will be supplemented over the next coming weeks and months with more in-depth things, such as like different kinds of takeoffs, flaps 1, flaps 3, different noise abatement procedures, and of course we'll also have a look at different types of landings. This was an ILS landing, we'll have RNAV landings, we'll have VOR, DME landings, and of course the auto land. Now they've been made available in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 thanks to the 5-hour team. Hope you've enjoyed this series. If you do have any questions, please leave a comment on the video down below. And of course, if you really enjoyed it, please do consider hitting the subscribe button and giving the video a share as well. Thanks very much for watching, guys. I shall see you in the next video. Bye bye for now.